Hi everyone, I'm Gertie and I'm so excited to be back with a new Patreon project. This is called the Wanda Pencil Skirt. And I was very inspired because I've wanted for a long time to bring you a pencil skirt option in the L series. So we've done a ton of bodices, dresses, other full skirts that interchange in the L series, but we've never done a simple pencil skirt. So I knew that this year we would have to do a pencil skirt that would be interchangeable with our L series. But of course, we wanted to bring you a lot of great options. We were super inspired by Wanda Woodward in the movie Crybaby to give you something that has a little bit of rockabilly flair to it. It's very fitted, it has some sexy options. But the thing I love about pencil skirts is that you can make it in a nice woolen fabric, wear it with tights, have a very wintry, cozy feel as well. So there are a lot of options depending on your fabric choice. But then, of course, we have also built in design and construction options for you on the pattern. So as you can hopefully see, this skirt is tailored with princess seams rather than darts. So you have these vertical seams running down the front and the back of the skirt that give it shaping. It has a nice tapered shape, so like a pegged shape at the knee to give it that very vintage, kind of sexy look to it. And then we've given you some options in terms of like vents and slits and some other things. So let me talk through it with you. Now on this version here and in the pattern this month, what we've included is a waistline facing. We haven't done a skirt with a waistline facing, and I feel like it's a really beautiful choice. It's very clean looking. Some people don't like waistbands, so this gives you that option. Of course, if you do like waistbands, you can mix in the waistband from the Charm circle skirt, which is what I'm wearing now, or the Loretta shorts, or anything from the L series. So you can add a waistband to the skirt if you like. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that it is fully lined. So it was really important to me, to the whole team here, that we show you a new method for lining pencil skirts, and we are going to be elevating that method with a clean finish lined vent in the back, okay? So pencil skirts are really easy to sew, but this is a nice elevated method, a couture level tailored method for you to learn how to line a vent. But we also wanted to give you some additional options for walking ease, okay? So no matter what, you need some walking ease in this skirt. If you want to do a front slit, a back vent, whichever, but you need one of those, okay? So on this one, we've done both because it can be nice to have options. You see on the front here, you can probably see the the invisible zipper tab at the bottom here. We inserted an invisible zipper, which is 24 inches long, into this seam. So you have this adjustable slit in the front. So you can go super risque here with a high slit, or you can adjust it to be a little more work appropriate, demure, or you can have it completely closed if you have the vent for walking ease in the back, which we do on this one. So I'm going to show you. So I'm going to turn this around. You can see we also have the vent at the center back seam. And this is the technique I was telling you about, the clean finish lined vent. So this is lined to the edges of the vent, really beautiful, beautiful technique that we will be demonstrating today. And at the top of the skirt, we have a lapped zipper here, okay? So that's one option for how you would make the skirt with the invisible zipper in the front slit and then the back vent. Now, if you really love that front slit option, you don't need the vent in the back. What you can do is you can do the invisible zipper. You can keep it, slightly open all the time so that you have some walking ease, omit the back vent. Or if you like a front slit and you feel like the invisible zipper is not for you, you just omit the invisible zipper and only sew this seam to the lower circle mark. Okay, so that's another option. But on these two versions here, we have done the front invisible zipper. So it can go all the way to the bottom, or it's 24 inches long, so it can be quite high here. And on this one, we did not do the back vent because we're thinking, you're probably going to have your front slit open to a certain degree at all times for walking ease. And you can see, because this skirt is interchangeable with our L series, here we have paired it with the Las Vegas halter top from this year on Patreon. And it gives a really great crybaby look to this dress. Also, another thing we wanted to do was add these fun decorative buttons, because that's a very Wanda touch. She has a lot of button front pencil skirts. And then you can see the one on the left here, I made in a stretch pleather, which gives it an entirely different look, and it can mix and match with some of your separates too, like the Patsy blouse here. Okay, so those are all of your options. It's all about the slits and the vents and the walking ease and this really cool invisible zipper feature. Okay, so let's get started talking about the pattern and then fabric and supplies. Let's talk about the pattern pieces. So as always, we have minimized the pattern pieces, so they're kind of doll sized here on the table so that we can take a look at them and try to understand the pattern better together. So minimal pieces for this pattern, which is great. You have your skirt front, which is cut on the fold. And an important mark on this one is the zipper circle. And this is only if you want to do the invisible zipper for the adjustable slit. Okay, so that's the only reason you would need to pay attention to that circle. All right, so cut on the fold, cut one skirt, one lining. Here is your skirt side front. And you can see there are matching notches on all these pieces. And one thing I wanted to call your attention to was how the pieces kind of curve away from each other at the top. And it can be a little bit confusing when you're going to sew them because you might think that this is a hip curve, right? So you want to pay extra special attention to your notches, make sure they match. And just know that the reason for this curve right here is because that's essentially the equivalent of a dart, right? We have princess seams instead of darts on this skirt. So think of that as like a cutout dart. Then you have your skirt side back, again, notches matching here. And then your skirt center back. And here's where the pattern gets a little bit complex, okay? Because of the option for a lined vent. You have a few lines here that you can follow depending on which skirt you want to make. So you are going to cut two of this piece in your fabric, no matter what. Follow that outermost line there where it bumps out like that. But your lining is cut a little bit differently for the clean finish lined vent. So for the right lining, you would follow this line for your cutting line. And for the left side of the lining, you would follow this marked line, okay? So you're cutting a different piece for your right back lining and your left back lining. Just follow the lines and you will be fine. The other option you have is if you are doing the front invisible zipper slit, and you don't need a back vent because you plan on keeping the slit open, then you are just going to cut along this line here, cut the pattern piece there. So imagine it's just like you could even fold it back if you want to have the option to use the other lines later with the pattern. So just fold it back and then cut it just straight down with the center back line. Now, other pieces are the facing front and the facing back. Facing front is cut on the fold, the back is not. And you're going to cut the front one fabric, one interfacing. The back is two fabric, two interfacing. So that's it. Pretty minimal pattern pieces with this pattern. So let's get talking about supplies and fabrics. Let's spend a little time talking about fabric and supplies for your pencil skirt. So let's look at fabrics first. You have your outer fabric, and you can use a variety of woven and stretch woven fabrics for this project. So broadcloth, we used quilting cotton for the polka dot Wanda dress. Okay, so that's one option. I'm sure you have a lot of broadcloth in your stash already. This is a great, nice, firm fabric to make the pencil skirt from. For Susie's Wanda Pencil Skirt, we used a white piqué, which is great. It has this texture to it, a little bit of structure to it, no stretch. So this just gives, I like how just a little bit of the piqué texture just gives it that little extra something. And of course, you know, here in New York, we're going into winter. So this is the time of year for wools. And I'm going to be sewing with this beautiful Harris tweed today. So think about tweeds, woolens, wool crepe, things like that. And again, if you want something a little more casual, you could go with denim for the skirt. Would look amazing. Either non-stretch denim, which this is with these fun little colored motes, they're called, or you could use a stretch denim. And then the final example I have here is a stretch pleather. We had some left over from our Las Vegas halter top, so we really wanted to do a stretch pleather skirt. So you can use something like this. It does have quite a bit of stretch to it, so just keep in mind that if you use a woven with a lot of stretch, you may need to take in your side seams a little bit because it will affect the fit of your fabric. Well, if you want more information on that, definitely check out episode 3 of our Fit Clinic because we talked all about how fabric and stretch affects the fit of a garment. Okay, so those are just a few examples, but if you want more specifics, definitely check out the instructions because we have the entire list of recommended fabrics. And next, you're going to need some lining fabric. Now, lining this skirt is optional, but we felt like this was a really great skill to elevate the skirt project for you. We're doing a clean finish lined vent today. So for your lining, you're going to want to choose something a little bit slippery, slides against the skin nicely, unless you don't plan to wear tights with the skirt at all and it's more of a summer skirt. Then you could choose, like for instance, with this broadcloth, I just chose like a white, more opaque cotton lawn, I think it was, just to give this a little bit more opacity because I knew I wouldn't be wearing stockings or tights with it. But if you are going to be wearing stockings or tights, you definitely want something with a little bit more slipperiness to it. So a nice inexpensive lining option would be an acetate lining. These are a little bit more firm and a little easier to cut than other lining fabrics. Or if you want to do something a little fancy, you could use a silk charmeuse, which is a little bit trickier to cut, but it feels very luxurious. A tip for cutting out slippery fabrics is that you can layer it in tissue paper and that will stabilize it for you. So that makes it a lot easier to cut a fabric like this. So your lining fabric, you're also going to need a little bit of interfacing for your facings. And as always, anytime we have a zipper in a garment, we recommend having some fusible strips on hand. So you can either cut strips from your fusible interfacing, cut them 1.25 inches wide, or we like to buy these ready cut rolls of interfacing. And we will put these in the resources list if you're interested in buying this, because it is really handy to have on hand for your zipper stabilization needs. Okay, also you're going to need thread to match your fabric. All-purpose polyester is good. And then we have a couple different zippers on the table here today because you do have the option of putting 2 zippers into this skirt, right? Your back lapped zipper, which you will need for all of the options on the skirt. So a back lap zipper. So this is a regular zipper, not invisible. And then we also have, if you want to do the adjustable slit in the front with the invisible zipper, you need a 24-inch long invisible zipper. You can go a little shorter if that's all you can find, because we did really have the slit go up really high, so you have a lot of adjustability. But if you're not going to be opening it that high, you could go with an 18, 20, or 22-inch invisible zipper. Okay, so that is all of your fabric and supplies. Next, we're going to get sewing. So we're ready to go ahead and get started sewing. So as I mentioned, this skirt has princess seams. So the first thing we're going to do is sew the princess seams on the skirt front. Okay, so as you can see, I have mine partially constructed. I've sewn one princess seam, and now I'm going to sew the other. So what we're going to be sewing today is a skirt without the invisible zipper in the slit, but with the back vent, because I felt like it was most important to show you that method for the back vent. But if you're going to be doing the invisible zipper version, you are going to make sure to insert your invisible zipper into the left front princess seam, okay? And we have instructions for invisible zippers in the instructions, obviously, and also you could refer to our Rita blouse tutorial for that. Okay, so I am not doing the invisible zipper in my version, so I'm going to go ahead and just sew these front princess seams as you normally would, top to bottom. So I'm going to put these panels right sides together. I've been saving this Harris tweed for many years, and I'm very excited that we're using it now. And I did cut it out to match the plaid, so I'm just going to make sure I match it as I'm sewing as well. So just top to bottom. And like I said in the pattern section too, make sure that you are matching the notches correctly, because it's very easy to sew the wrong side of a panel here unless you follow those notches. So when I'm matching plaids, I like to look at a significant line, like let's say this blue one right here, make sure it's matching on the other side. And then I will put a pin through at the top of the line and make sure it's matching on the underside by using the pin to check my placement. And then I will just continue to fill in pins that way, making sure everything looks like it's gonna match. You can check this big stripe here, the pink and purple. And if it's off, you can just shift slightly. So it's really important to do a lot of pins when you are matching plaids. Other times I wouldn't use a ton of pins on this seam, but because of the plaid situation, I'm definitely going to fill in a lot of pins. And you can also see that I serged the vertical edges of this skirt. Now, because the skirt is fully lined, you don't necessarily need to do that because it's fully enclosed and the seams are fully enclosed. So don't worry if you haven't done that step. The reason I did it is because this fabric does fray quite a bit. So if you have a fabric like this tweed that unravels a lot, then definitely consider doing some seam finishing before you construct, just doing those vertical edges. Okay, so I'm happy with all my pins. Now I'm going to sew this seam at 5/8 of an inch. Oops, I'm on a zigzag. Use a straight stitch. And again, when you're matching plaids, you want to wait to take your pins out until the very last possible millisecond here, so that you don't undo all that work you just did pinning. Okay, so now I'm going to press this seam open. You can check your plaid matching if you did match your plaids. I'm going to press this seam open, and it's good to use steam for a wool like this and always press from the wrong side. Okay, so I'm going to keep pressing this, and then we're going to come back and talk about the side seam and the center back seam. So we have sewn the front princess seams. I sewed my back princess seams. And now I want to talk about sewing the center back seam, because this is very particular with that clean finish vent. Okay, so if you look at my two center backs on the ironing board, actually, why don't I turn them so that they are facing me? So as I'm looking at it, you can see I've cut both sides of my center back like we talked about so that they are the same. They have that little angle out and then the vent, right? And now there are a few marks that are important here. I've marked them in yellow. There's a yellow dot here, and then you will see a yellow dot up here, and this is the zipper dot. Now, side note, you will want to add interfacing above this yellow dot, okay? So I will do that off camera. But I want to show, it's really important that I show you this seam. So what's going to happen is we are going to put these two pieces right sides together. And we are going to be sewing from the zipper yellow circle down to this yellow circle at the top of the vent angle. And this is really important that you are super precise with the sewing. You want to end exactly at this yellow dot. And another important thing to note is that there is also a notch about 2 inches above the bottom yellow circle. Okay, so just note that for now, and I will show you what to do with it next. All right, oh, I gotta match my plaid. So a lot going on with this step. Okay. So I'm starting at my zipper circle. I'm going to back stitch. And then sewing down until the circle at the top of the vent. Okay, so here it is, this yellow circle right here. I want to end precisely on that point. So I'm using my hand wheel. That looks good. I'm going to back stitch. Okay, now grab your scissors, because what we're going to do next is we're going to do a little clip at the notch. Okay, so see this notch right here? I'm going to clip to the seam line at the notch. And then above the notch, I'm going to press the seam line open. Whoops, there goes my ham. Press the seam line open. Down to where I've clipped, I pressed open, and now from the clip to the hemline, I'm just pressing everything to my right as I'm looking at the inside of the skirt. Okay, like this. And that's it. The next thing I'm going to do is sew the side seams of the skirt. So I've got my back unit and my front unit. I'm going to sew them together at the side seams, and then we're going to come back and talk about the lining. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the lining of the pencil skirt. So I pinned it to my sleeve board. This is the center back seam. I really wanted you to see the difference in the left side and the right side. Remember, I was talking about how you cut them differently based on the cutting line on the pattern, okay? So the left side, as I'm looking at it, which is this one, you cut in like this. And then the right side, you cut out, all right? So you have two opposing angles here, all right? So just make a note of that. And now the next thing we're gonna do is sew the seam exactly like we did for the outer skirt, okay? So sew between those two circles, clip, and then press to one side. And the difference is we're gonna be pressing this to the opposite side of the skirt, okay? But don't worry about that for now. Now you're just going to worry about sewing the seam. I'm going to put away my sleeve board. Okay, there we go. All right, so I am pinning. I am looking at my circles. So here's one circle, and then there's my notch that I clipped to. Remember that? I'm going to pin there. I'm going to fill in a few pins here. And then I'm going to put these two together at the raw edges, and they're obviously not going to match at the vent edges. But the important thing is that I sew exactly to that circle and no further. Okay, I'm actually going to start at the bottom on this one. start at my lower circle, right here. As you can see, this charmeuse ravels a lot too. So if you're using this kind of fabric, you may want to serge it in advance as well. But you don't necessarily need to, because like I said, the inside of the skirt is fully enclosed with the lining. Okay, and I stopped stitching at my zipper mark. Okay, so once again, I'm going to press open. I'm going to put my ham in between the layers here to help me. And this is that notch where I need to clip. And then above the clip, I'm going to press the seam open. And then below the clip, remember how on the skirt I pressed it to the right? I want to do the opposite of on the lining, so I'm pressing this to the left. And this is, all these steps are what are going to give us that beautiful clean finish on the vent. Okay, so you're going to construct your entire lining, side seams, princess seams, all of that. And then the final steps on the lining are going to be to do the hem, all right? For this clean finish, you need to do the hem before you insert it into the skirt, all right? So you'll want to shorten it because you don't want your lining to be the same length as the skirt itself. So you're going to take an inch off the bottom of the lining. So I'm just going to mark it like this all the way around, taking off a full inch. So I'm going to mark an inch all the way around, trim it off on that marked line, and then I'm going to hem it, okay? Because we want to hem before we insert the lining. So you're going to use a 5/8 of an inch hem allowance. So turn the hem up 5/8 of an inch and top stitch, okay? So I'm going to go do those steps and then we will come back and talk about what's next. Okay, so I have hemmed my lining. It is all ready. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the facing and attaching the facing to the lining, okay? Because we have a waist facing on this skirt. So I have gone ahead and assembled the waist facing, and by that I mean I have attached the two backs to the front. So essentially sewed the side seams on the waist facing unit, okay? And this is what it'll look like. It's very curved. Remember, it's interfaced. I forgot the word. It's interfaced. And also I wanted to talk about the lower edge of the facing, okay? You have two options here. If you're using a lightweight fabric, like say maybe for that white cotton piqué version that we made for Susie, in that case, you would just turn under and press 1/4 of an inch and then top stitch onto the lining, okay? Top stitch the two together. But in the case of this Harris tweed, which is now interfaced and is quite thick, we don't want to turn this under because see how that's going to create this thickness that could create a ridge on the outside of your garment. So we want to keep things very flat, low bulk. So instead, what you can do is serge the lower edge. And as you're serging, trim off that 1/4 inch that you would have pressed under in the other option. Okay, so that's what we've done here. Just serged here, trimming off a 1/4 inch. All right, so now we are essentially going to apply the facing to the skirt lining. So you're going to put the wrong side of the facing onto the right side of the skirt, and we're going to match the edges. Okay, so the waistline is going to match. These edges are going to match. And you can start by pinning them together just at the waistline. And you may guess that what we're going to do next is we're going to baste these together at the waistline. I did want to say too that you have another option, which is if your fabric is very thick and you feel like it has enough stability, you could forego the interfacing. That's another thing that I've seen people do in a case like this where you have a combined lining and facing. And especially if your lining has any stability to it, you may feel like the two layers together are sort of the equivalent of an interfaced facing. So that's one option. But if you feel like you just need a little bit more stability for your facing, you can apply the interfacing as usual. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is baste these edges together, starting at one short end. I'm going to go to a long stitch, like a 4 or 5 millimeters. So I'm going to go to the short end. I'm going to be working at 1/2 inch, just basting these layers together. And now I'm going to pivot to working along the waistline edge. Oops, I didn't put my presser foot down. Pivot, and now I'm basting along the waistline edge at 1/2 inch. Okay, so I'm just going to continue like this. Okay, and now that those edges are basted together, now I want to stitch using a regular stitch length the lower edge of the facing to the lining. So I would put a few key pins around here to make sure it doesn't get twisted or anything like that as you're sewing the two together. And actually I'll probably be starting from this side, so it makes sense to put my pins this way. Okay, and now I'm going to edge stitch this lower edge of the facing to the lining. And here I'm going to switch back to my regular stitch length. Okay, so I'm just going to continue with this and then we will come back and talk about next steps. Okay, so now we are ready to do the actual sewing of the vent. So I want you to grab your skirt and your skirt lining. And you can see they're both wrong sides out. So I'm going to put the skirt inside the skirt lining so that they are right sides together. And we're going to do this in a few steps, all right? Because it is a little involved, but you can totally do it. So we're going to focus on the right side as we're looking first, okay? So what I want you to do is match together this long side of the vent. Remember, we have this angled side at the top, and we have a circle at the top, and we're going to match from the circle, matching these raw edges and pinning down to the bottom. But what's going to happen at the bottom is that we're going to turn up the skirt hem 1 inch around the already hemmed skirt lining. Okay, so they're nested together. And now I'm just going to sew from the bottom fold of the hem up to the circle mark, and that's it. And I'm stitching at 5/8 inch with my 2.5 stitch length. Okay, you can see I still have an unstitched portion between those two circles. But what I'm going to do now is press this seam allowance towards the skirt. And one thing you might want to do is trim away this lower corner here to get rid of any bulk, like that. So pressing both seam allowances towards the skirt. Okay, so that's it for the right side as you're looking at it inside the skirt. And next we'll move on to the left side. Okay, so now we're moving on to the left side of the vent as you're looking at it from the inside of the skirt. Okay, so this side is going to feel a little weird just because, remember, this is the one where the lining is cut in, has this little like cut in corner like that, but you still have a circle to match. It's really the same thing that we just did. It's just the shapes are different, right? So you're going to match this circle to the circle on the skirt. I'm going to match these raw edges. And I'm going to turn up my skirt just like we did on the other side. And make sure you turn it up the same amount that you did on the first side. So make sure they're even, because otherwise your vent is not going to be even, right? So I would just make sure to compare them. And again, you are nesting the lining, the already hemmed lining, inside your skirt hem. And there we go. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did on the right side. We're going to sew from the circle down to the fold of the hem. Start exactly at that circle mark and then backstitch. And then stitch using your regular 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I backstitched. And now we're going to repeat the process of trimming this lower corner to remove that bulk when we turn it right side out. And next, pressing the seam allowances towards the skirt, same as we did for the first side. Okay, so that's it for the left side. Okay, so we have sewed both sides of the vent now. And the next thing we're going to do is turn the whole thing right side out and press. So turn the lining to the inside. Just take a minute to, it can get confusing what's going on here. So take a minute to get your bearings. You want to be looking at the vent itself, right? I'm just going to get the rest of the lining pushed inside there. Okay. And now these little corners, I'm going to turn them right side out. So they form these nice little corners. And now we're going to press the vent, okay? So from the right side, we're looking at it. The right side of the vent, this is the one that's going, the lining is going to become flush with the edge of the vent. So you can put a sleeve board or something in between the layers here. I'm going to use my ham. And press it to the edge. And see how I have a little extension at the top. I'm going to press to the bottom. And eventually the whole hem will get turned up, right? And the lining will get turned like that. So we have a nice clean finish on the inside. Okay, now we're going to take the left side as you're looking at it from the outside. And we have a 1-inch vent extension here, okay? So you are going to turn the lining in like this, and you're going to turn this vent extension in 1 inch. All right, like so. And then I'm going to put the two on top of each other and press. So the left and the right sides of the vent on the skirt on top of each other. Like so. And just make sure all the layers are nice and flat. Okay, and I'm going to pin this lining in place down here. You can pin things in place if that helps you. Pin the overlap in place. Because now we need to go inside the skirt and do a little bit of stitching at the top of the vent through all of those layers. Remember, between those two circles that are still open, we're going to close those up from the inside of the skirt. So what we're going to do is we're going to be focusing right here where all those layers are. It's that angled top of the vent extension, okay, right there. So we got to go in between the layers and find it. So you're looking for that angled section on the skirt, the 2 layers of skirt, and then 2 layers of the lining. And just take a minute to get your bearings here. You're matching those circles. So I've got skirt, skirt, lining, lining. And what you'll see right here on this side is that everything gets a little bit weird because you need to clip to the seam allowances at the circle, or the seam lines at the circle. Okay, so I'm going to clip my lining like that. And I'm going to clip the skirt itself. And the goal is to just get all 4 of these layers to lay flat on top of each other so that I can pin them together. Like so. There we go. All right, so again, I'm working between these 2 circles, right? Because they were still open. I had not stitched between them. So, okay, just make sure all your layers are flat. And now I'm going to take this to the machine. Take my ham out. Take this to the machine. And I'm going to stitch from one circle to the other. And back stitch, and I'm stitching at 5/8 of an inch. And back stitch at your next circle. So that's it. It was just that little section that we had to close up. So now if we turn it back right side out, we should see that everything is now going to lay nice and flat. And it's a nice clean finish vent here. So see how now this is secure? And when we go to hem the skirt at the end of the process, you're going to need to do a little bit of hand stitching right here, right? So just that little corner. But you're going to have a nice tailored looking vent. Okay, so the vent is done, looking beautiful. And now we are going to attach the waist facing to the skirt. So finishing at the waist. The first thing I did was I turned in the seam allowances at the zipper opening. Now, you've probably done a lap zipper with me at some point, so hopefully you remember that on the right side of the lap zipper, you're going to turn in the seam allowance 1/2 inch, and on the left side, you turn it in 5/8 of an inch. All right, so I've already done that pressing so that it's ready to go to do our clean finish at the waistline. And the technique we're going to use is what we always use to do a clean finish at a neckline with a lining or a facing. So it's the same thing, we're just working on a waistline now. Okay? But I do want to show you the way that you put these two layers together is really important. It actually reminds me of when we did the swing coat, if you remember back to that video. The way we're going to have to do this is to put the facing right side together with the skirt and then work in between the layers, okay? You don't want to make the mistake, which we've made twice now in the studio, of pulling the skirt out to the outside and putting it right sides together with the lining, right sides together with the skirt, because then you get this weird infinity loop, right? So you want to really watch out for that. So what you're going to do is just, I have the facing lining unit on the inside of the skirt. I'm just going to take these two and put them right sides together like this, right? Because that's how we want to sew it. And then you have to work in between the layers. Like so. So I'm matching up seam lines, notches, all of that. So I'm just going to spend a little time pinning here. And then we're going to work on that clean finish. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to pin. Okay, so after you're done pinning, you can test to make sure that you pinned it without an infinity loop, which is really important. So if you want to just try turning it right side out and make sure, because that's less annoying than having to rip those stitches out. And the next thing I want to talk about is that clean finish at the waistline. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is the right side. Let me put my ham in between here so you all can see as I'm working. So if you've ever done, like I said, clean finish on a neckline, same thing. My right side is my underlap side. My left side is my overlap side. On the right side, I'm going to nest all the layers together and turn them out 1/2 inch. So grab your ruler and just check that real quick. So those are 1/2 inch, and you're just going to stitch those together. On the right side, you're going to nest these two layers separately. So you will turn the lining / facing unit in 7/8 of an inch, and the lining, the skirt itself, 5/8 of an inch. So there should be a 1/4 inch gap between the two. Okay, and then we're going to pin these together like this. And that will give us the nice clean finish for our lap zipper. Okay, so now we're ready to stitch around the waistline. So hopefully if you've done the clean finish neckline, this is looking really, really similar to you now. We're doing all of the same steps just on a waistline instead of a neckline. I'm stitching at 5/8 of an inch, starting at that folded edge. And I'm going to stitch all the way around to the opposite edge, ending at the edge of the fold. Checking it again. Yep, okay, looks good. All right, so I just had to double check that I didn't do that infinity loop. And now I'm going to grade these seam allowances. I'm going to clip first across that corner. And then I'm going to grade the seam allowances. The skirt and the lining, or I'm sorry, the lining facing unit can be the shortest one. And then the skirt itself can be slightly taller. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around, trimming one shorter than the other. Okay, so now we're going to understitch the facing. So you're going to get in here and you're going to isolate the facing so that you can stitch right along here while stitching down the seam allowances. So pull the skirt kind of right side out. And that's much easier to work because you'll be able to open out the lining and work right here. Okay, so I am stitching just about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam line, and I'm making sure that my seam allowances are oriented towards the facing. Okay, so next step is pressing. So I want to turn the lining to the inside of the skirt. And now I'm going to isolate this upper edge. And I'm going to roll the facing to the inside of the skirt. And press. And on a wool like this, you can use a lot of steam. Like that. And I'm just going to keep pressing all the way around the waistline like this. And then we're going to come back and we will be ready to insert the zipper. Okay, so we are ready to sew our zipper. So we've already turned in our seam allowances. We've got the underlap turned in 1/2 inch and the overlap side, the left side, turned in 5/8 of an inch. I've got my 9-inch regular zipper. And so I'm going to start with pinning the underlap side. So you can open it about halfway and you're going to orient the top of the zipper so that this bend right here is flush with the upper edge of the skirt. And then you can just kind of release that. All right, so now I'm pinning the fold right next to the teeth of the zipper. Get all your little threads out of the way. So here's the fold of the fabric and here's the teeth. All right, now that I pinned the top, I can close the whole thing, which should make this easier for you to see. So we're going to stitch on the fold right here, right next to the fold, through the outer skirt fabric and the zipper tape. And you want to keep the lining free, okay? Be really careful not to stitch through that. So I'm going to switch out my zipper foot. And I'm just going to orient the needle so that it's closest to the fold. All right, so you can open your zipper about halfway here. This fabric is very thick, so let's see. I want to be stitching right next to the fold. And then back stitching. And I'm going to stitch all the way to the bottom. When you get close to the zipper pull, you can stop with your needle down, close it, and keep going. Okay, now I'm going to back stitch. Okay, now we can pin the overlap side. So close the zipper all the way, it already is. Okay, get the lining out of the way. And now I'm going to lap the overlap side over the underlap. Looks like my plaids are going to be a little off, but c'est la vie. Okay, so we're going to match, more important that we match at the top, right? And then I'm going to pin to the left of the fold. And I am pinning through the fold and through the zipper tape below, making sure that the lining stays out of the way. So you should still be able to open the zipper. And I like to put a horizontal pin in the bottom where I'm going to pivot with my stitching, because your top stitching is going to be in a nice L shape. Okay, so now I'm going to open my zipper all the way, and I'm going to top stitch through the fabric and through the zipper tape at 3/8 of an inch. If you need to just check your pins, you can check those. I'm going to move my needle to the other side of the zipper foot, and I'm going to stitch at 3/8 of an inch. And I'm making sure to keep my lining free. And when you get as close as you can to the zipper pull, then you're going to stop with your needle down and close the zipper. And now I'm going to keep stitching. And now when I get to my horizontal pin here, and I'm going to stop with my needle down, pivot, and stitch over the base. And then back stitch. And that is your lap zipper. So we're going to come back and talk about finishing techniques. Okay, so you can see I have a beautiful looking pencil skirt here with a beautifully lined vent. So that was our big technique today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the things you need to do to finish it, because it's pretty much done. So you're going to need to do some hand stitching on the inside of the zipper here. You can see it's already kind of trying to do this here. You're going to turn this in, you're going to fold in the zipper a little bit, pin this here, and then hand stitch the lining to the zipper tape and the top of the facing here. Okay, so you're going to do that. In terms of the top of the skirt, you know, we don't have the waistband like we normally do, but you can, if you want a little more security here, you can put a hook and eye between the layers right here so that you have something to hold it at the top. So you would hand stitch a hook and eye. So that's another finishing thing. And then you have the hem. So like we talked about, you're going to need to do some hand stitching right here to hold this side of the vent in place right here. And then for a fabric like this, I would definitely recommend hand stitching your hem. Okay, so you're going to do a slip stitch, making sure that you don't go all the way through to the outer layer of the fabric. You're just grabbing a thread so that you're not seeing any little dimples or anything on the outside of the fabric. Of course, if you're using a more casual fabric, you could top stitch it, right? So you would top stitch your hem at like 7/8 or 3/4 of an inch, because we have an inch hem allowance there. Okay, and so then finally, if you wanted to do some swing tacks between the layers at the side seams, you could certainly do that to hold the lining in place. But the way it's stitched to the vent should help it stay in place as needed. So that's it. Then you have this beautifully finished pencil skirt with a lovely, clean, finished back vent. Okay, everyone, I hope you have loved learning how to sew the Wanda Pencil Skirt. And I hope you've loved learning some new techniques this month, like that very elevated, clean finish lined vent in the back, and also how to attach your lining to the facing for a clean finish at the waist. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for being patrons, as always. I hope you love this project. And don't forget to share photos of your projects with the hashtag Wanda Pencil Skirt. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.